Well, hello and welcome to the latest edition of Sport Chat with me, Jon Francis. Plenty of topics to talk about today. We're going to be looking at grassroots sport. We're also going to be looking at the return of golf and the fact that the Ryder Cup has been pushed back to 2021. And we're going to be looking ahead to the start of the new football season in Scotland, and particularly Dundee United promoted back to the top flight. With me today, I can tell you that I've got Calum Woodger, sports writer with DC Thomson Media, which includes the Dundee Courier and Evening Telegraph. We've got Matthew Cooper, freelance golf writer for the likes of ESPN and BT Sport. And we've also got Mark McNichol with us, director of In at the Deep End in Sunderland. Hello to you all. Hope you're all well.
Morning.
Morning.
How you doing?
Let's start with the grassroots sport, Mark, because obviously that announcement by the government, very important yesterday, wasn't it? The reopening of swimming pool facilities, outdoor pools from tomorrow and indoor pools in a couple of weeks. You must be relieved and delighted at the same time.
Absolutely thrilled. It's great to be able to start getting children back into the leisure centres and for swimming lessons to restart.
Yeah,
it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, Ben, I was just explaining the impact that it's had on your company, the fact you haven't been able to get anyone into your swimming pool.
No, once the lockdown started, we literally had no income coming in at all. And I think that's the same with the majority of swim schools around the country, and leisure centres as a whole. As soon as lockdown started, income stopped completely. So we really do need to restart the industry because people are going to be in a lot of trouble without.
Yeah, and it's that age-old debate, isn't it, about the obesity levels in Britain, and swimming is one of those activities that you need a lot of people involved in, a lot of children to get involved with early on, and they've been denied that because of the lockdown, and vitally important that they can use these facilities again moving forward, Mark.
Very much so. And I hope we're able to restart quickly enough that we don't start seeing a spike in drownings and accidental deaths around swimming pools, especially over the summer as the weather hopefully gets nicer.
Yeah, Callum, just to touch on this before we move on to the topic in the Scottish season stuff, grassroots football as well. There's been a lot of confusion about that, hasn't there? There has in England anyway. I don't know if that's the case in Scotland about getting kids back in, five-a-side games, and still not really that clear guidance on what can happen in terms of getting kids matches back on again in football.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a big shame for the kids. I mean, it's and Mark's talking about the physical benefits and the safety as well, but it's a social thing as well. I think that people miss, and the kids as well, particularly getting to go out and play with their mates and to develop skills, because what we need in Scotland and across the UK is kids out kicking footballs. It's hard enough to get kids out away from screens nowadays, so to have this in at the same time, being able to go out and play organised sport is frustrating. But yeah, hopefully there's an end in sight. We're seeing professional leagues, obviously the Premier League in England's back, Scottish Premiership's back soon, so hopefully it's sort of opened the floodgates and we can get football back at all levels, because it is a game played by everyone, not just the professionals, amateurs, kids, everyone. So we all dying to see it back.
Yeah, you must have sympathy for some of the amateur clubs, because it's been so difficult, hasn't it, for the professional clubs? You working closely with Dundee United, and Dundee, how difficult it's been on a professional level, let alone these amateur clubs and kids clubs trying to get some action back on the field.
Yeah, your heart does kind of bleed for them a wee bit. I mean, it's the financial side for them as well, to have the no membership fees coming in, things like that, people not paying their subs, not playing. You worry about the very existence of clubs. The system up here in Scotland, particularly in football, you have amateur football. Our version of semi-professional football is called junior football, and that'll be suffering as well. So yeah, you do worry for them, and it's the community as well. It's a community aspect. It's a lot of maybe the only thing some people do every week: go out and watch a game at the side of a pitch in a park, or go out and it's the only exercise they get. It's upsetting, but we all know how necessary it's been. Just hoping now that with lockdown easing, with things seemingly getting better across the country, that we can things like sport back, I think you realise how important sport is when things like this happen and we can't do it.
Yeah, in terms of golf, Matthew, the golf courses actually opened pretty early, didn't they? In terms of the amateur game, that's been quite fortunate in that respect that amateur golfers and golf clubs have been open a while now.
Yeah, it's actually been a little bit of a mini boom to golf. So a lot of clubs are reporting that they've had an increase in membership. A lot of them have been quite sensible. They've come up with sort of short-term membership schemes to get people playing quite quickly. But I think in England we started playing late April, and then Scotland joined in late May. I played a few rounds myself. It's like the obvious sport to sort of play at social distancing. You're doing it slow enough that you can control what you're doing. You can stay away from your playing partners quite comfortably. So it's gone well so far. The professional game's still a little bit more dodgy, but they've coped pretty well.
Yeah, and Mark, one thing I wanted to ask you is how social distancing going to be maintained in terms of swimming, in terms of in and out of the pool? What are the guidelines there, and what are you doing to make sure that it can work? Because we've already seen, haven't we, in terms of kids going back to school, how difficult it's going to be.
I think the biggest thing for us, and probably the same with football and a lot of the other industries, is going to be the changing facilities. So we're looking at doing things like asking people to come beach ready, so that they can literally come and go straight to the lessons. There'll be one-way systems into the change rooms and out through another door. We're hoping that lots of the children will wear sort of toweling robes or thick onesies and just be able to get out of the pool and go straight home at the end. And it's going to be a lot of the control around people not congregating in change rooms between lessons, and just a new way of working and learning for everybody. And I think, picking up from some of the other sports, it's working together with the parents and saying, we're all learning this together. Let's see what we can do and make the best of it. A lot of places are going to stagger lesson times. So we haven't got everybody coming in at the same time and going at the same time. But again, that's quite a big change, and it's going to need planned in.
And have you had plenty of support from the local area in terms of getting all these guidelines set up, and parents and even schools perhaps as well?
We mainly hire school pools, and they've been absolutely brilliant. They really have been very, very supportive. Our national governing body, the Swimming Teachers Association, have been putting guidelines down now for probably about 6 to 8 weeks and refining it as things have been updated. So we've had a very good idea of what things were going to look like when it reopened, so it hasn't become too much of a shock when the final stuff came out yesterday. We've done a lot of work with parents and communications and dialogue with them, and they're just desperate to get back. And I think the comment that keeps coming in, as long as we can make sure it's safe, and as long as we're being open and talking about what plans we've got to keep them safe, they want to come back and they're ready to come back, which is brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Superb. And Mark used the phrase, Calum, desperate to get back. I'm sure the Scottish teams are desperate to get back as well. I mean, cancelled last season, didn't they? Celtic crowned the champions, but it meant that Dundee United promoted to the top flight. But that doesn't tell the whole story, does it, with what's going on in Scottish football in terms of the legal situation and the ramifications? Just give us the latest on that, and tell us about preparations for the new campaign as well.
There's one Scottish word you could use to describe what's happened, and it's a stushy. A big argument, basically. But yeah, it all obviously with the shutdown of Scottish football, I think it was very kind of early to mid-March with the coronavirus when it first sort of came on everyone's radar. At that point is when discussions started about how the season would conclude. There was talks of making the season null and void, of continuing it when it is safe to do so. There was talks of calling it at that point and crowning champions and relegating teams based on average points per game won. That's what the league decided as a collective between the 42 member clubs in the Scottish Professional Football League. But yeah, the voting processes came under fire a little bit, and the way that the vote was initially carried out. There are some clubs who, quite rightly so, probably felt hard done by. by getting relegated. Hearts from the Premiership, Partick Thistle from the second tier, and Stranraer from the third tier were unhappy at their relegations. And there are other teams who were close to promotion in the lower leagues. Falkirk in the third tier were just a couple of points behind Raith Rovers when the season was called, with I think it was 8 or 9 games to go, depending on how many games the teams had played. But yeah, Dundee United had benefited from that. Dundee United were able to secure promotion that way. They were probably going to secure promotion anyway. They were about 13 points ahead. But yeah, that is still rumbling on in the background. Hearts and Partick Thistle had put in legal challenges to the quarter session against the SPFL, and had dragged the teams who had been promoted, Dundee United, Raith Rovers and Cove Rangers, into that debate. It's been thrown out the courts now, and it's going to be heard by the SFA on the arbitration panel. So yeah, that's all kind of been rumbling on in the background. It's been a bit dramatic. It's been like a soap opera, but for us, it's kept us in news stories, which is great at a time like this. But it's a regrettable situation. There were talks of league reconstruction, so that it would work out in a way that no teams are left in a worse off position. But yeah, we've not heard the last of that yet. I think the conversation might come back around to reconstruction once this is heard by the SFA. But yeah, it's been an interesting time, certainly. No lack of drama.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll focus on Dundee United a little bit more specifically in a few minutes. But Matt, not as dramatic golf-wise, I suppose, in terms of the shutdown and getting it. I suppose the main debate with golf wasn't it, about moving the tournaments around and the majors, and we've seen the Ryder Cup move to 2021, but that took a while to make that decision, didn't it? There was talk of playing it behind closed doors, but surely an event like that couldn't have had no people watching it because the crowd make it, don't they?
Well, you would think so, but I think the fact that they were contemplating it for so long actually reveals the sort of the reasons why the rumblings went on for so long, and that basically amounts to the fact that the PGA Tour in America is a solid financial proposition itself. Every year they create a load of money, and it's enough to keep them going. But the European Tour is quite a different kettle of fish, and the business model is that every 4 years they get a home Ryder Cup, and the money they make from that home Ryder Cup will fund them for the following 3 years. So it's absolutely vital for them to sort of plan that 4 year period. And basically what that amounts to is that the Ryder Cup not happening in America this year delays the next European one by another 12 months. And that gives them a big problem. So I think Keith Pelly, who's the CEO of the European Tour, his big issue has been over these last few weeks and months, just can they cater for that? And it has emerged that there's going to be a lot of job losses at the European Tour. They're looking at probably 70 of 370 jobs. The players are going to be playing for a lot less money. So all of this means that they can actually cope with this 12-month lag. And it seemed terrible because, as you say, the fans are the massive thing. But I think what lots of people were looking at as the debate was, would you play the Ryder Cup with fans or without fans? Whereas the real issue was, would you play the Ryder Cup with no fans if it meant maintaining the European Tour's history and its actual sort of present and future? And I think they've managed to come up with a plan. A lot of financial people have said, because they know they're going to get that 1 year of a lot of money, they can actually plan, the accountants can plan to get there. So they'll have problems in the short term, but eventually they should actually catch up with the situation. But as you say, nobody wants to see a Ryder Cup with no fans, because of that first tee, the conclusion of the event, it's all about lots of people shouting and screaming.
Yeah, absolutely. And how much influence did the players have on all this then? And they were quite vocal, weren't they, about it, and the captains as well? Yeah,
I think Rory Mcilroy, who the last sort of year, Rory Mcilroy is a sort of voice of reason in golf, has really sort of blossomed. He made it very clear that he didn't fancy playing in front of no fans. I think he'd have been a little bit aware of the European Tour situation and would have been able to exert enough influence to let it be known that the players didn't fancy a sort of weird vacuum in Chicago. Brooks Koepka was especially keen not to play under those circumstances. So I think that will have impacted to quite a large degree. I think the captain's probably a lot happier as well that it's going to be this way. There was lots of talk that between both of them that it was a possibility or not a possibility, but they know that. And strangely, Padraig Harrington, in one way, would feel he'd want to have no crowds because, of course, Americans are famously quite vocal in their criticism of the Europeans, and it's been one of the big problems for Europeans winning in America. But actually, this Ryder Cup being in Chicago, Padraig Harrington, an Irishman, there's actually a lot of reason to believe that there'll be quite a lot of support for the Europeans in Chicago.
An interesting one, that, yeah. Just to say as well, Calum, massive for golf, isn't it, in Scotland, that side of the economy, that we do have spectators on the courses when some of those big tournaments come around on the Scottish courses as well.
Yeah, it would be a massive boost to have that. So I hope that is what happens. Yeah, it's a huge part of Scottish history and the culture up here as well. In Dundee, we're only 10, 15 miles from St Andrews, so we all know the history of that and the tournaments that come there every year. So it's disappointing about the Ryder Cup, I have to say. It's one of the events that over the summer you look forward to watching as a fan on the television if you're not lucky enough to be able to go. I think after the Euros being cancelled, I've decided I'm going to have to get a life now as well. There's no football over the summer, there's no Ryder Cup over the summer, so but it's probably the right decision. I think we've seen over this lockdown sport without the fans, even at the highest level, where like the English Premier League, where it's commercialised football, even still without the fans, the game could survive, but it's not the same game. The interest level isn't there, the atmosphere isn't there. It would not be the same. And like Matt says, the first tee of the Ryder Cup's always a huge moment, and you want that big crowd there waiting for the first tee off. So 2021, can't wait. It's going to be a great summer, so hopefully.
Yeah, we hope so. It rolls round, doesn't it, into 2021, the Olympics as well, hopefully too.
Yeah.
Matthew, just a quick point on the Solheim Cup had been moved already, hadn't it, to not moved, it was in 2021. And the Ryder Cup's now in the same year. Any effect on that and the women's game in particular?
I think so long as it happens just the once, maybe, it could be a bit of a bonus because it drags them into the sort of what we hope will be the super summer of 2021. And so they get a little bit of a little bit that limelight. And also it can add to a sort of glorious September of Europe versus USA. So it could, in that sense, it could actually be spectacular. Whether it will be a long-term thing, I don't know. It might well be that eventually they'll slip to the sort of previous pattern of 1 year on, 1 year off. I think that would be more preferable, but I think in terms of it being for 2021, I think it will work pretty nicely, assuming that all other things are equal and we do have the fans, which we've got to hope is the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to make the point, by the way, for those of you watching, Mark had to leave us. He isn't having technical problems. Just thank him for joining us for the first part of the programme there about grassroots sport. Thought it was an important topic to cover, given the government announcement yesterday. Let's focus a little bit more then, Calum, on Dundee United, the fact that they are back into the top flight in Scotland. A great boost for half of Dundee anyway. The fact that they have gone back into the top flight. Just tell us how the season preparations are going. Mickey Mellon appointed new manager as well, for former Tranmere boss. We all know well documented down here in England about what's happened with Tranmere and the points per game, and the fact they were relegated and they were really unhappy about that, and they've now lost their manager, haven't they? And he's gone to Dundee United. So how are they shaping up ahead of the big kickoff, and of course the fixtures out as well in Scotland?
Yeah, I just met Mickey the other day on Wednesday. I say meet, just like I'm meeting you guys right now over Zoom. We had the Zoom call with Mickey on Wednesday. And he came across really well. I think a lot of people say, it's great if you can talk the talk, but you've got to walk the walk. But at this very early stage, I think it's good that he's coming across well to the fans. He's likeable, he's personable. We've all heard a lot of good things about what he did at Tranmere in terms of building a community around the club, and you need that when you're at a smaller provincial club, as much as Dundee United are a big club in Scotland. In terms of what you need to do to keep the community engaged, I think Mickey will be able to do that. His records on the park, in the dugout, speaks for itself. I think it's 5 promotions at the 3 clubs he's been at. So that's a great record, even if it didn't go so well for him at Tranmere last season. He's got a pre-existing relationship with the sporting director, Tony Ashgar, at Dundee United as well. They've known each other. They go back about 10, 15 years to when Tony was an agent and had some dealings with Mickey then. So it looks like a good fit. Looks like a good fit. And the club, it's been a long 4 years sort of stuck in the wilderness in the Scottish second tier in the Championship. I mean, we all know the history of Dundee United from the 70s and the 80s and big European games and league wins, cup wins. Even in the last 10 years or so, they've had cup wins and European runs and things like that. So the fans are absolutely itching to get back to that kind of level. Maybe not exactly that level, but to be at least be in the top flight, at least pushing in the top half of the top flight, and going for these higher places and going for European football. And the fixtures are out now, so that gives them something to look forward to. They've got St. At home on August the 1st provisionally, and we'll see how that goes. It'll be a tough game. They'll just be happy, I think, to be playing these kinds of teams again, to have trips to Celtic and Rangers or to Aberdeen, these kind of bigger clubs rather than playing in the seaside leagues, as we call up here.
I was going to ask you what's the expectation then of the fans of Dundee United, because they are a club that should be in the top flight in Scotland, and it just goes to show, doesn't it? If it's like in England as well, in the Premiership, we're looking at Leeds at the minute, top of the table. How long it can take a team to get back if they do drop out of the big time.
Yeah, the expectations are high. I think the sort of Mickey's been kind of left a grenade by the previous regime a wee bit. Robbie Nielsen and the previous managing director, Mal Brannigan, had came out stating they want to get into the top 6. They want to be pushing for European football and domestic honours. So that pressure's on Mickey now. Whether that's the actual expectation from the board and from the sporting director, I don't know. But I think most fans would be happy for consolidation next season. Somewhere in mid-table, maybe top 6 would be great if they could do that. But just to become stable again and to become somewhat of a power in Scottish football once more, to be challengers, to make it difficult for other teams maybe to win, and then to sort of gradually build things back up again to get the club to where it was, because it's been lost for a while. It's lost its identity, but they've had the new owners come in and they seem to be willing anyway, whether they can actually do it, but they seem to be willing certainly to financially and kind of emotionally and believing in people and getting behind them. So yeah, it's looking positive again. For a while it wasn't, with Robbie Nielsen sort of leaving under a cloud for Hearts and stuff, but the expectations among the supporters is always high. That's just the pressure of managing a club like Dundee United. Yeah,
absolutely. So what's the state of the game in Scotland at the minute then? I mean, obviously the fact that they did have to cancel that season. I know there's a lot of talk in England about the finances of the lower league clubs. I presume it's the same situation with the Scottish clubs and the game generally up there. What's the general feeling going into a new season? A bit of trepidation about what's going on behind the scenes and trying to get at least the football back on the pitch?
Yeah, I'd say certainly the financial side of it's a massive thing. Apart from probably Rangers and Celtic, the old firm clubs, it's a problem for everyone. You're seeing pay cuts at the other city club, Dundee, that they're asking players to take pay cuts. There's talk of them cutting their academy functions. But yeah, the general kind of feeling is everyone's itching for football to get back, simply from a sporting point of view. But there is the worry of how viable it's going to be and when we can get fans back into the stadium, because Scottish football is very old-fashioned and traditional in the way that it still relies largely on supporters for its income. There's no big TV deals. There's no massive commercial partners. It is really quite local and dependent on the fans. So there is trepidation there, particularly from the smaller teams. A lot of obviously got concerns about their very future and existence. Like I'm sure is the case lower down the pyramid in England as well. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of concern, and you can understand that. But the Premiership's back in 3 weeks now, so teams will be getting used to the new normal of how they do their training and trying to. And I think it'll be like England when it came back. The standard and maybe wasn't quite as high in the first couple of weeks, but it will kind of gradually players will get back to that competitive edge and first team fitness, and we'll see the game back, which we're all dying for. So
yeah, absolutely. And Matt, really, in terms of golf, the setup there, I mean, obviously there's the big tournaments. So what about some of these smaller tournaments and having to stage them without, if they do have to stage them without spectators? I mean, it's what lower down the pyramid, as it were, in golf, is it a struggle there too?
Well, we had the very strange circumstances yesterday, which is that, in theory, if everything had been perfect, we would have been off to Royal St George's in Sandwich for the Open next week. I'm going to be missing that on Monday, my trip to the Open, favourite week of the year. But it was bizarre. If you'd have said to us when we left Royal Portrush 12 months ago, many of us consider it, the finest Open that we'd ever attended, but brilliant atmosphere, fantastic fans, great result. If anybody had said to us as we left there that the Open wasn't taking place at Royal St George's next year, but the women would be playing a tournament, we'd have gone, you've been on the pop all night after celebrating Shane Lowry winning. And yet that is the remarkable thing that happened. So yesterday there was a one-day tournament with the women at Royal St George's, which is just extraordinary, because this is the golf club that famously had a signpost in the car park that said, no dogs, no women. And just an extraordinary sort of outdated notion. But I mean, the club has come leaps and bounds forward and basically just said, we haven't got the Open, so we might as well join in with what is now known as the Rose Ladies Series. And it's a little string of events that's been a real lifesaver for a lot of British female golfers. But in terms of the men, the PGA Tour is still trundling along. They've been going since the start of June, and to some extent it's worked. They've played plenty of decent golf. They've not always been brilliant at social distancing. So there's been a few cases of coronavirus, but it's also been quite confusing because some of the people who've had it have had positives and then negatives and positives and negative tests. So that's a little bit tricky to understand. In theory, we'll have a major in August, which is the PGA Championship. That'll become the first major of the year. In theory, the US Open in September and the Masters is still on track for November. There'll be no Open. As I was saying, it's not just that it's not happening next week, it's not happening at all. And the European Tour started in Austria this week, and they've put a video up of what they're doing in terms of testing the players. The players are masked for most of the time. It seems like they've been quite fortunate that they've seen the mistakes that the PGA Tour have made, and they're being very, very thorough in their attempts. And the real key for them is that in 2 weeks' time, there's a UK swing of events. There will be 6 events that take place in the UK. When I say the UK, it's actually England and Wales. But that will allow lots of players to sort of play a lot of catch up, and hopefully it will build a bit of a head of steam. And in theory, the PGA Championships on this side of the woods at Wentworth will take place later in the season. So we'll have some sort of normalcy if all of this happens. I'm hoping that the more players get used to social distancing and being tested regularly, the more they'll actually, rather than become a little bit lax with that, they'll just kind of cope with it and deal with it. And in theory, golf should be able to cope to some extent, because other than the big events, especially in Europe, we're actually quite used to not many people watching it. That's the real secret to it. It's like, you watch an awful lot of European Tour golf and attend it, and there's not a lot of people who watch it, so it's not really going to make a great deal of difference.
No, absolutely. We'll see how it goes on the tours in the PGA and European Tour. Just really briefly, Calum, I take it you're going through all the protocols ahead of the new season and the testing in place in Scotland, and some quick predictions then for Dundee United with about a minute to go.
Put my neck in the a wee bit. I don't think they'll make the top 6. I think they'll comfortably stay in the league, though. I think of the 12 teams in the top flight, Dundee United somewhere between 7th and 9th. I think they would be a comfortable mid-table kind of season, and to consolidate and build. But again, Mickey's only just in the door. We'll see who he signs, who comes and goes, other situations in the league, and take it from there. But they'll definitely be in the Scottish Premiership for the next season.
Yeah, I would have thought so. We'll chart their progress throughout the course of the campaign. Calum Woodger, sports writer with DC Thomson Media, and Matthew Cooper, freelance golf writer. Thanks very much for joining us on Sport Chat today. Appreciate it.